Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you here at the German Climate Pavilion, and for those of you joining us virtually in our live stream, maybe from Germany, a very early good morning to you as well. Great to have you on board. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first event for this day is organized by the Federal Foreign Office and the Stiftung KlimaWirtschaft. They are co-organizers of the event, and for the next hour we have the topic of investing in corporate climate leadership here on stage. How do we mobilize the trillions that are needed for the net zero transition? What is needed from our leadership position? As we all know, the businesses and the industries, they will have to transition to net zero emissions. There are targets already in the room, and it is the finance COP. It's in every corner here in the pavilions. It is a key challenge, as we're also talking. Where do we get the money from? How do we bridge the gaps and the lack of the investments? So it is high on the agenda, our topic of the morning here on COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan. And now for this event, we brought different perspectives here on stage. So we will bring the perspective of the governments, of the public banks, of the private financial sector, and of course, when we talk about corporate climate leadership, the perspective of businesses to debate how can we mobilize for a better coordination, how can we mobilize the trillions that are needed. It's great to have you everybody on board. Thank you for joining us this morning and for marking your calendars for this event. And to start into our day, I welcome now virtually Sabine Nallinger. She's the Executive Director of the Stiftung KlimaWirtschaft, and as I said, she's welcoming us with her welcoming statement.
Good morning from Berlin. My name is Sabine Nallinger. I'm the Managing Director of the German CEO Alliance for Climate and Economy. I would like to extend a warm welcome to this side event, which we are hosting together with the German Foreign Office. I'm sorry that I can't be with you today. Like you, I'm worried about the difficult political context for climate action. It is very important that this COP shows that the world is working together to tackle climate change. I also have good news to share with you. The German CEO Alliance for Climate and Economy brings together big German businesses from all sectors of the economy. Last week, we had a big meeting with all of our CEOs, and what I can tell you, they are still very committed to climate action. They are moving ahead. They are setting climate targets. They are developing transition strategies. They are making investments into climate-friendly technologies. Some of these companies are here with you today, and I look forward to hearing more about their leadership. A challenge is mobilizing the investments needed for the transition of their business models. We need trillions of investments if we want to reach our climate goals. We need both private and public investment. This event will explore solutions for how to mobilize investment for the transition to climate neutrality in the business sector. I would like to thank the German Foreign Office for the cooperation and the fantastic moderation and speakers which are with us today. I look forward to the discussion and wish us all insightful event.
Ja.
Wenn Sie rechtzeitig da
Thank you, Sabine Nallinger, and I know you're going to join us virtually, and the whole team is watching us, so thanks again. And I think blue is really the color of today, right? We didn't talk before, but nevertheless, I do see a lot of blue today. Thank you, Sabine Nallinger, and greetings to the whole team. Unfortunately, you're not here with Baku, but you are with us here, of course, for our event. And to start into our day, I said the topic of today is corporate climate leadership. Sabine just, of course, draw it again. We have a fireside chat before we start in the big round, and for that I welcome Dr. Katharina Bäumelburg here on stage. I missed my espresso, but you did it well. Thank you. Let's have a sit down, and I hope you arrived. I think it's switched on and running.
Okay, yes, it works.
Wonderful. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Bäumelburg, thank you so much. Dr. Katharina Bäumelburg, I welcomed you already. You are the Chief Sustainability and New Technologies Officer coming and joining us from Heidelberg Materials, one of the largest integrated manufacturers of building materials and solutions when it comes, of course, to decarbonizing. Your products and your services are used in the construction of houses, infrastructure, commercial, industrial facilities, so we all need your materials in some way or the other. You're also supporting what Sabine just mentioning the company of Stiftung KlimaWirtschaft, roughly translated as the German CEO Alliance for Climate and Economy. So let's dive right into, everybody's talking about the way forward into decarbonization and to net zero. What is Heidelberg Materials doing? What is every day on your desk as to-dos?
Very nice, thank you. So, first of all, I think for Heidelberg Materials, the whole topic of decarbonization is very, very essential because cement is the second most used material in the world after water. And if we look at the development, the urbanization, this is not going to change. So we will need building materials and cement in the future, and we need it to increase the well-being of populations everywhere in the world. At the same time, the production of cement is a highly emitting process. And other than in other industries, the emissions do not only come from the energy we use, but the emissions as well come from the process itself when we produce the clinker and use the limestone. Having that said, the decarbonization of cement for us is a very, very essential problem, and it's a day-to-day problem which is really on our table and at the core of what we do and what we work on in R&D every day.
Last year, when we're looking back to Dubai's COP28, Heidelberg Materials launched the first net zero cement named Evo Zero.
Yes.
Where do you stand with that today? Maybe you can, show a little bit of the journey from COP28 to COP29. Now, what happened in the last in the last days and years?
So first of all, from this last year, I only participated in the last 6 weeks since I only joined the company October 1st. But nevertheless, we launched Evo Zero about a year ago. Evo Zero being a carbon-free cement. And coming back to what I said before, it's a product where we take all the different levers that are available to decarbonize the cement. Meaning, first of all, in terms of energy use, we move away from fossil fuels and use alternative fuels and renewable energy in the process. Then in the process itself, we try to use as many cementitious materials to bring down the clinker part in the cement, which is really the part that has the high emissions in it, as far as possible. And we will always end with a significant CO2 amount left after we have taken all of these levers. And for this rest, we use carbon capture and storage, and we are the first company in our industry that will produce a carbon-free cement based on CCUS in our plant in Brevik in Norway. That will be fully operational in the first quarter 2025 and will produce the first carbon-free cement with the CO2 under the earth in the second quarter.
Why are you such a front runner? You said you're the first one here and there. You know, what drives you and what drives, of course, Heidelberg Cement to be a front runner?
You know what? That's actually a very, very interesting discussion, right? Because you can be the front runner or the fast follower. I think in any case, our company is very aware of the responsibility we have, because cement will be needed for a very long time in the future. It's a very essential product. It's important for the well-being of the people, and at the same time, it's this really high-emitting product. And I think we have chosen the path to be a front runner. We have the highest commitment because our goal is to get down to 400 kilograms CO2 per ton of cement by 2030, which effectively means that we half the amount of emissions compared to the 90s. And this is our way of approaching and working with this. And I think this is really a business opportunity in itself as well, because the building materials of the future will be sustainable products. The future will have to be significantly more sustainable. So for me personally, this whole topic is not we have to be sustainable. This whole topic is we create a new market for more sustainable building products. It's a business opportunity. This is why it's worth it to be a front runner.
So, as I understood you correctly, you understand it as a business case, not just as a trend in sustainability and going forward, but rather also to be ready and to create and design new business cases. Is that correct?
Yes, you are exactly right. So I think in the medium and long term, all the sustainable products will have business cases. The only question is, how do we get to the business cases? And this is exactly where we need the partnership with the regulator, where we need to make sure that the national and the global governments move forward and bring the frameworks that help us to make these business cases work as fast as possible. Because in the end, the private sector is stakeholder driven. So it's not that the private sector can invest without business cases long term. So we need to make sure that we get to the spots where business cases work. And I think there are beautiful examples for that. In the power generation industry, for example, where renewable power today is the cheapest form of power in 95% of all countries in the world. So there are very good examples how you get via scaling to working business cases, and that's what needs to happen in our industry as well.
We're going to talk about that as well. Of course, Anna Lührmann is also joining us. So when we talk to regulations and regulatory details, we're going to talk, of course, with her as well in a second. We are expecting Anna Lührmann in a second, but before we are filling up our panel, so to speak, I'd like to come back a little bit on the journey on how to decarbonize the cement industry, because if you mentioned it's a business case, but it sounds very easy. In practical everyday life, it's very difficult. So I know you joined the company 6 weeks ago, so thanks again for being then here on a panel. What is something that surprised you the most when it comes to decarbonizing the cement industry? Because a lot of heavy industries, they are working towards new business cases, they're working towards finding solutions, towards decarbonizing their products. What is something that astonished you the most? Because you were coming from the energy sector, now being in a heavy industry, cement industry. What surprised you?
So first of all, I think what's happening right now is very interesting in a lot of ways, because industry sectors are, via decarbonization, really growing together. So in the past, there was the energy sector, then building materials sector, steel, whatever else. So the different industry sectors that we have, and now we have a shared, so to say, problem, which is the decarbonization. And this is how really sectors grow together and share knowledge, experiences, people. They work in constellations that were never needed before, and they certainly need T's and C's that work together. So lots of problems that arise because these sectors that in the past were very separate from each other are now working together. What surprised me most in the, and that's the ultimate reason why I thought it makes sense to, I was in the oil and gas industry before and now joined the building materials industry. What surprised me most is how how progressive the industry is driving the topic. Because if you look at the carbon capture plant that's going to go live in Norway beginning of next year, that's really pioneering work. And if everything goes as we plan, in the next summer we will have 3 different types of carbon capture and storage facilities running. And that is, how can I say that? That's pioneering work. This is really being at the forefront of what it takes to decarbonize a hard-to-abate sector. And I think that's what took me most, and this is why I thought it's a good place to make a difference in decarbonizing the planet.
You're here at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, joining, of course, several panels. What brought you and with what hope did you arrive here to see from the COP and, of course, from the different stages when we talk about climate action, when we talk about new business cases? So what is a hope that you would like to see and that you would like to fill with life as well?
So for me, I think a lot of things need to happen to make, exactly as you said, business cases work fast. For example, we need a joint regulatory framework for global carbon markets. So I was very happy to see that there was an agreement on Article 6.4 on carbon markets. So my hope is that this COP is used to really decide on frameworks that are supporting the hard-to-abate industries in the decarbonization process. I really hope that national and global targets are kept where they are and that the commitments are stay in place, and that we really make sure that all these commitments are at the forefront still and are not pushed back. Because I think that would be a very, very bad signal for all the industries that are already investing and that are trying to be the front runners and are in the decarbonization processes already. And that we get to more private-public partnership because that's what's needed. Because we need all hands on deck to drive it forward.
All hands on deck, that speaks also for cooperation, and I think that is a perfect keyword now for filling up our panel here with more people on stage. Thank you so much. Katharina Bäumelburg for that first fireside chat. We go with the flow, as it says. I think now she's hi. Now we have a quick-off plan. Shall we? Is the keynote coming up now, or shall we start with the panel? I'm just confused. Katharina, I'll see you later on stage. Thank you so much. Yes, perfect. You did the right job. Katharina Bäumelburg, thank you. Hi. Nice to see you again. Lovely to see you again. Yes, we started already with our lovely panel about corporate climate leadership, and we are very much looking forward to have you, of course, this morning as well. You're just coming from the big hall with the heads of state, so you couldn't leave earlier. But thanks again for being here again. And of course, we'd like to hear more from you when it comes to the COP29, the finance COP. What can you tell us, and how can, of course, corporate leaders be supported in that regard when it comes to decarbonization and net zero? The stage is all yours. With us, Dr. Anna Luhrmann, State Minister from the Federal Foreign Office.
Yeah, very warm welcome to the German Pavilion, also from my side, and apologies for the delay. I was in a meeting with the President of Togo and other African participants from the African Climate Summit that took place in Nairobi last year. And the aim is really to make sure that also the African continent contributes from or benefits and contributes to the opportunities that lie in the green transformation. And here, really, at this event, we've emphasized over and over again that in Africa we have 60% of the area that is suitable for renewables, for solar in particular, but only 1% of the investments, right? And this is something that I think, particularly for business leaders, is a key factor to understand, that actually the area where we have so much potential for solar, for green hydrogen, still the investment is not happening. And I think that's one of the key stories here at the COP, that we actually see a lot of solutions there, but we need to implement it faster, as we say here in the German Pavilion. And I think the COP still is a good way of these kind of matchmaking between businesses and countries and opportunities to invest. The second thing I think that we see here as at this COP, in the conversations that I had during the last days, is that the private sector is now a big source of hope for climate action. We see some setbacks in the political arena, to phrase this diplomatically, but the private sector is really the one where already I feel that the switch has been turned towards climate neutral investments, towards competitiveness that takes place over the question of how do we actually achieve the aims of carbon neutrality with e-mobility, with renewables. And this is also something that will continue regardless of specific election results, because this is the way global economy is going. This is the way companies all around the world are orienting themselves. So it's also a beacon of hope for this green transition to continue. And the third observation, maybe from my first days here at COP, I don't know how your engagement has been so far, but basically everywhere I went to, people have a very, very dramatic personal story to share about how the climate crisis has impacted them during the last year, since the last COP. I mean, I had a conversation with the Prime Minister of Spain. Obviously, the dramatic floods, more than 200 people lost their lives. I spoke with a representative from Kazakhstan who told me, look, in my home area, we never had floods, and now for the first time ever, we had historic floods. Many people lost their homes. I mean, basically everyone you talk to, you see the climate crisis is real, it's affecting everyone. It's a major security threat. So this is really something that we are currently seeing, and therefore this adds also the urgency to what we're doing here. And I think it's more needed than ever that this COP actually brings results. Nevertheless, we expect some negotiation challenges, of course. As you know, the main aim is to come out of this COP with a new goal for climate finance. Here, it's very clear that we need a new approach, and here again the business sector comes into play. We need to reflect current investment needs in order to accelerate the green transformation. We need to put a new emphasis on concessional finance, focusing on areas that typically don't receive enough investments, especially adaptation general, as well as mitigation for LDCs and SITs. I mean, I was just talking about my observations at the African Climate Summit event. We need to push for more grant-based and long-term finance to avoid debt stress and to unlock private investments through the blended finance schemes. And we need to call for broader public finance from more contributors. This will be one of the key challenges that we have in the negotiation, of course. And at the same time, the second big objective that we have here at the COP is to actually put some action to the agreements of last year's COP, you know, these key agreements that are pushing us towards tripling renewables, towards doubling efforts for energy efficiency and towards transitioning away from fossils. Here we need to establish now mechanisms to collectively track progress on these mitigation goals from last year. We need to have further steps for implementation, such as sending clear signals that we make here clear progress. For instance, we agreed to phase out all fossil subsidies that don't contribute to energy poverty alleviation or just transition by 2025. We really need to take steps in order to achieve this. I mean, we have election campaign taking place over this issue in Germany, already starting now. We need to establish also a roadmap to phase out all fossil fuel subsidies as the next goal. Then we need to make progress on the commitment to phase out unabated coal power, leaving no room for new coal plants in order to get on track for 1.5. We also need to focus on large grid and energy storage enhancements as an implementation also of the goals that we've agreed at last COP. We need to focus on green skills in all sectors. So some really concrete action, I think, that we can include here also in the negotiations. So maybe to wrap up and then to come to our joint discussion here. As I said in the beginning, I think it's very clear now that the perspective on businesses has changed from maybe sort of the passive recipients of policies, or maybe the ones that need to be compliant, to the ones that actually drive also the agenda, that innovate, that help to bring forward climate solutions. And I think the numbers that we see on employment in the renewable sector, for instance, are really supporting these kind of statements. So we have 16 million jobs globally in renewables in 2023. And it's also very clear that we need to shift the investment in this sector more and more, but I hope we'll discuss more about this now on the panel. Thank you so much, and thanks for being patient and for your interest in our work here.
Thank you. Dr. Anna Lührmann. We quickly changed the setup of the stage before we then welcome, of course, our panelists. Please join me on stage and I do the round of introduction in a second. With us, of course, again, Dr. Katharina Bäumelburg, Stefan Wintels is with us, Constance Schalcher and Shamila Subramani. Thank you. The only man, as Stefan Wintels stated. Wonderful. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Yes, we already mentioned quite a lot of keywords. I just do a quick round of introduction so everybody, of course, is on track. Who is on the panel? We just listened to Anna Lührmann, Minister of State for Europe and Climate at the Federal Foreign Office. Then next to her, to your right, ladies and gentlemen, Stefan Wintels, the CEO of KfW since 2021, and KfW is one of the world's leading promotional banks promoting global development. So you really bring the perspective of the public development bank here on stage. So thanks again for joining, Stefan. We do have to the left Constance Schalcher. Merci and bienvenue here in the German Climate Pavilion. You are the Chief Sustainability Officer in the Corporate and Institutional Banking and Global Market sector of BNP Paribas. And as you know, you might know, but you will also state it in a second, BNP Paribas is a universal bank, really driving forward corporate and institutional banking, linking financial needs of companies with institutional investors. But what does it mean, and what are the steps ahead? We are looking forward to hear that from you in a second. So thanks again for bringing the perspective of the private bank with examples here on stage. Dr. Katharina Bäumelburg, we've already had a conversation here on stage. So again, Chief Sustainability and New Technologies Officer at Heidelberg Materials. Thanks again for being also here present on stage. And last but not least, joining us from South Africa, Johannesburg, Shamila Subramani. Thank you. You are the CEO of the National Business Initiative in South Africa, short for NBI. This is an independent coalition of local but also multinational businesses focusing on taking action to achieve what we are talking about, corporate climate leadership, but also social and environmental sustainability in their business cases. And with that, of course, with that round, I'd like to start with you. When we just heard, of course, from Heidelberg Materials, being on their journey towards the business case, towards decarbonizing and towards net zero. Now maybe we could listen to you, bring your perspective, but also a lot of examples from South Africa. How do businesses in South Africa move towards net zero and how they are on that journey?
Thank you. Good morning. We're still morning. Thank you. And thank you for having me. So, Katie, I was very inspired by listening to Katerina as well. We've got hard-to-abate sectors in South Africa, but bigger than that, we have a largely...
Just 1 second to the technical staff in the back. We couldn't listen to the people. Maybe you can just... Is it okay for you, the volume? Could you hear everyone? Okay. So, but we need a little bit more volume here. Sorry. Didn't want to interrupt you, but please go on. Thank you.
I think just to sketch very quickly that in South Africa, I mean, apart from just hard-to-abate sectors, we've obviously got an entire energy grid constraint in relation to still being sort of over 80% coal-fired power stations. So the challenges, I think, are different across different sectors. We've got quite a varied and diverse economy. If we look at the historical part of the economy, we're sitting with quite a large mining sector that has shrunk in the last number of years, but I think is also a sector that potentially poses opportunity, because apart from coal, we've obviously also got a lot of the critical minerals that are going to be needed to power the economy. So there's a shift in what we need to do to ensure that that sector is producing that sustainably, and so the energy grid is perhaps our biggest constraint at this point in time if you look at the emissions profile of the country. And that of course is going to impact every single sector within the economy that is dependent on that. So when we're looking at how companies have started to decarbonize, in many instances has been almost in spite of the constraints that we have from the national grid. And so we're seeing quite a significant uptick in renewables. I think the last year and a half to 2 years, we saw more renewables come onto the grid than we did in the previous 10 years put together.
Because of the new government in South Africa, or just because of
prior
the
to the new government, it wasn't just I don't think they can take credit for that at all, Katie. So what we're seeing is, firstly, of course, we had energy constraints. We've had a lot of load shedding. So just energy availability, energy security was, of course, driving some of that behavior and the need to just transition. And of course, as we see, the cost of renewables comes down, and we're seeing that we have the material, right? I mean, we've already heard statistics around Africa that Dr. Anna has spoken about relating to being 60% available, but yet so little of the finance. So what we have seen is certainly, in some instances, the private sector being pushed out of necessity, simply for energy security, but on the other side, it's bringing down the cost ultimately. What we could certainly benefit from, I think, is better public policy, of course, because when you're seeing private sector just act on its own, it's doing that outside of an incentive structure or a framework that could be far more enabling and hence give you a lot more bang for buck for every, rand, dollar, euro that you invest. And so we've seen perhaps maybe some of the more expensive shifts happening when they could have been a lot more efficient had we the right enabling policy framework. And so those are some of the things we're seeing. So if we look at from a sectoral example very quickly, we're seeing that the sectors are shifting to renewables. We are seeing, I think, a renewed and I think exciting hope on energy efficiency, which seems to have been forgotten for some reason as being a quick win. So we're seeing those shifts start to happen. What I think is also exciting, perhaps not less from the real economy, but from the financial sector side, and I feel like I need to state my credentials as a former Chief Sustainability Officer amongst these here. So I was the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange until April last year. And you see the shift across the financial sector where we're seeing asset owners, asset managers, and the banks starting to look at their own investments. And what does that mean? And starting to clean that up. And that, of course, starts to push change in the real economy as well.
Let's stop here, because we do have, of course, more rounds. But when we talk about policy frameworks, I come back to you in a second. But nevertheless, I'd like to start with Constance first, hoping that I can delete my load shedding app very soon, besides everything. But Constance, when we talk about the financial framework and the architecture, of course, what Shamila was just mentioning, maybe you can give us an insight of what is BNP Paribas already doing and what are they planning to do when it comes to invest in clean energy, when it comes to support, when it comes to designing a new, greener financial architecture that is helpful.
Yeah, so maybe we go back to the why on the private sector. We will only be net zero if all our clients are net zero. So we have a very acute motivation to accompany our clients, the states, investors and corporates into their net zero trajectory. Now, we've been massively investing. We were taking, like Helderberg, the fast forward, best-in-class approach. So we've been arranging, and we are on the top of the league table on green and sustainable bonds. This is a very good capital market instrument to finance the green transition. We know where the capital is going. It's onto green projects, and this is really what we're extremely good at. And on top of this, we created in agile mode, which is very different way of doing things in the bank, a group called the Low Carbon Transition Group. So it's blending engineers coming from all the hard-to-abate sectors. They know the sectors in depth. We have bankers, seasoned bankers, and we have a set of structures who are able to mobilize resources internally, but also externally, to be able to accelerate transition. And this can take lots of different shapes and forms, from real estate financing, project finance, but also market paths, identifier, and advisory for our clients. Now, there's still a lot of barriers, and I hear the public sector telling us, you, private sector, need to act because we have some setbacks. That's where it gets a little tricky, because we do not have a magic wand.
No?
So
Why not?
we wish.
But tell us, what is then the answer to that question and to that expectation, right?
So first, the money will only go to robust technology. I think what I loved in what you were saying, Katharina, is we need a business case, medium to long term. If there's no business case, there's no money. So that's, I mean, sometimes, we're faced with projects and you're like, it will never fly. So we need to have a visibility on the fact that one day it will fly. Then investors and the private sector can only put money if there is some level of reassurance or visibility. I think visibility is the term I was trying to aim at. So we need to have a certain degree of visibility over 10, 15 years on demand and prices. Because I think, and that's what you were saying, we need to get to a business case which is self-sustained. And until then, we need to know more or less volumes, prices, and the regulation that goes with it. That means that the public sector can act. They don't need to put all the money on the table, but they need to have some skin in the game. They need to be able to say, well, for example, let's take the SAF example, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. We're going to put a regulation which will put that level of percentage enforced onto airline companies and with this price. And this will be the trajectory for the next 10 years. That's when we can act, because then we know there's going to be some demand, we know how much money we can put, and we have the right security level. In some countries where it goes wrong, and I think in some countries we see government doing total regulatory shifts. So from one day to the other, they're going to say, well, we had told you there's going to be this price guarantee, not the case anymore. And that's where all investors lose confidence, because they lose the trust in a country to stick to their word when it comes to pricing signals. So this is absolutely important.
Thank you so much for that first impression, and I see you nodding all the time, so there's a lot to agree on. Is there something where you disagree, quickly?
Nothing where I disagree. I just would like to kind of emphasize the point of we need a demand as well. So, and that's the other point that I think that's a little, how can I say, under-discussed, that we need to create this green markets as well. So the one side is we need to produce green products, or like Evo Zero, like a carbon-free cement, and at the same time we need to make sure that these demand rises. And for example, in the construction industry, half of all the construction projects are state-funded. So that's something where I think we need to create a pull and a push at the same time to come to the business cases.
Thank you for that addition. Switching to you, Stefan, to our right-hand side of the stage, when we talk about finance and investment, we heard a lot that there is, of course, a lot of expectation towards the business industry. But from your perspective, and of course as CEO of KfW, where do you see opportunities for private investors, but also for public financial institutions as the KfW to cooperate on investing, to really deliver together and to be together on that journey towards net zero?
Yeah, first of all, I think to size the investment requirements, if we take Germany as an example, and thank you very much for the invitation this morning, we speak about 5 trillion in Germany and 190 billion of additional investments to achieve our climate objectives, 190 per annum, 70 per annum billion. So the investment requirements are significant. We believe, our research, that 90% is coming from the private sector. And if that is true, from my perspective, and that was a key motivation why I moved from the commercial banking side after more than 20 years in my career to the public side, that we need a new form of partnership between public institutions and the private sector. At the end of the day, we will only win this fight against the climate risk if the private sector has a business case and has investment opportunities. And the dilemma which we still face, that the climate and biodiversity risk is not part of our balance sheet, i.e. is not seen as an economic liability, right? Although we know the costs of climate change and we know the costs of the loss of biodiversity, but it's not part in the calculations. So therefore, if we say there is no business case, that's only half true, I would say. And hence, I think it's really important that policymakers push, at least for climate risk, on an effective CO2 pricing mechanism, which also includes instruments like CCU and CCS to make pioneers like Heidelberger Cement a business case. Because I don't believe that the government financial resources are sufficient to provide grants and grants and grants or subsidies to fund these business cases. Currently, globally, we have 7 billion, according to the IMF, of global subsidies for the fossil energy sector, 7 trillion. This is more than the world would need to fight against climate risk. That's the equation where we need to shift over time these amount of financial resources into the fight against climate risk and the preservation of biodiversity. And in institutions like KfW, with the support of the German government, I think our financial know-how and our engineering know-how, we have more than 8,000 people, we are in 80 countries, we know how to de-risk transactions, we know how to finance transactions, we know how to work with BNP and others because we do it since years, but we also know what is not working. Let's focus on things which do work, on structures which work, and please progress on a stable framework which allows companies to take long-term decisions. That's the most important thing, because Heidelberger Cement will only remain a pioneer if the second two project makes a business case. Otherwise, shareholders will ask Heidelberger Cement, why are you doing this? This is not our role, this is our money. So, and therefore, I think a round of applause to institutions like Heidelberger Cement, who don't want to be a fast follower, but want to be a pioneer. That's very much important, and I think we as KfW are super committed to support these sectors and put the government into a role as a role model. I think that is really important, that the government demonstrates within its responsibilities that it's possible to do, to execute, and there are many areas where no private money will be available. If you think about education, if you think about municipal housing, etc., where also CO2 plays a big role. So I think it's a great way to find new forms of collaboration from my perspective, and it's a great way to mobilize private capital if there is a business case. I think investors and companies are absolutely prepared to walk this road if the street is there and we have a long-term perspective.
So who would you like to drink a coffee with to debate that on a 101 discussion when it comes to bring the speed for investment for a greener transition? Who do you like to have like a very precise conversation with to really bring up these points?
In Germany or
maybe here at COP29.
No, I think we have a very good relationship with the World Bank.
Yeah.
I think the German government has done a great job to advance on the new global financial agenda. I think that is a really important partner, the World Bank and other multinational institutions, but we are also in 80 countries, and we are prepared to go these new forms of partnerships and contribute. So, but there are many names I would love to have a coffee with, right? So afterwards. But we need to move into action and demonstrate that things are possible. That's where I am super committed, and that's why we organized in Germany the first energy conference with investors in Frankfurt. The first time in Germany that global investors came together and discussed with government representatives how we can bring capital into Germany, because there was not enough pressure. Now there is pressure also in a country like Germany to mobilize more private capital given our fiscal constraints. And that's the way how we do it. Engage investors in solutions and provide the framework, policy framework and the conditions to accelerate the path to net zero. This is a strategic imperative for the next generation.
Thank you, Stefan. Is this policy framework also important in terms of strategy for the German government? And of course, what are your expectations? We listen, of course, there are expectations coming from the policymakers, but also towards the businesses and vice versa. So where would you and what would you underline as expectation again, looking towards the business sector and driving forward when it comes to the corporate climate leadership? Anna Löhmann.
Well, thank you. Well, my key expectation is, of course, for businesses to be willing to take some risks also sometimes, no? Because we are basically here in a sector where we have some established business models that work very well, like renewables, where now the costs have really gone down, the jobs are created, but now we have to move to some sectors that are a bit more challenging, like cement, for instance, where we really have to take some very, very big also investment decisions. And so therefore the expectation to the business side, of course, is sort of do your thing, innovate, take risks, go also to new markets. I mean, it's really when I travel now around the world, or I have conversations like today with the president of Togo, we really see there are many markets, many countries that are ready for more investments, also in the field of renewables. And now we have to, at the same time, I know from conversations with businesses, also with private financial institutions in Europe, that capital is actually available. So somehow the matching doesn't take place, right? There is capital that wants to go invest in the green transition. There are countries and companies and markets that have actually bankable projects also, but we need to bridge this gap, and for that we have KfW, of course. So I think our role here as public entities is to help to take off your shoulders some of that risk, but we cannot take all of that risk. I mean, business is always about being entrepreneurial and also being bold and courageous. But I think what we want to see here at COP, also with the new financial goal, is to actually have acknowledge the role of the private sector also in investing in climate solutions, and in us as public sector in helping a bit to bridge this gap.
Anna Löhmann, how can Germany play a role in also supporting not just German businesses, but also businesses on the journey to net zero in emerging and in developing countries? So where do you see the role of Germany, and of course the role of Germany's companies to be there a front runner as well? So maybe again expectation, and then I come to you with a little reality check, what really happens. But what is Germany's role here, not just supporting that journey in Germany itself, but also a little bit outside of the box? And
yeah, maybe 3 points here. One is, again, finance, to help to bridge this gap between capital available, bankable projects through guarantees. I think that's something that we have been doing for a long time with KfW, but that we're also increasingly doing now in this space of climate solutions. Second, being a front runner. I think it's no coincidence that now one of the first technologies that is really cheap and widely available is renewables. Also, I think, again, partly because Germany has been a front runner here with the renewable energy laws and all the transformation that we've set up already 10, 20 years ago. And now these technologies is widely available. Half of electricity in Europe is produced by renewables now, and I think that clearly makes it also possible for other countries in the region, in the world, to profit from this early technological leadership. And the third thing now sounds a little bureaucratic, but to make the next round of NDCs investable. So, you know, this is one of the key. Most of you know that's one of the key instruments. Under the Paris Agreement, the nationally determined contributions of each country. Often they're relatively abstract at a high level, and now we want to break them down into concrete steps that actually then also present business opportunities.
Thank you. Constance, you're nodding as well, and Anna Lührmann was also mentioning earlier in her keynote, investment is not happening yet. So again, the big question on that COP, where do the trillions come from, and where do the investments come from? What is your perspective on that when we also talk about innovation in investment, innovative key elements?
Yeah, so I think I was at a meeting with the World Bank last week, and the head of infrastructure was saying there's no issue when it comes to capital. There is plenty of capital. I think we still have an issue in some emerging countries with a lack of trust on the governance. And the head of infrastructure was telling some of the African countries that were in the room, you need to fix your governance issues, because if this is not fixed, the money will never fly. So I think that needs to be said. Again, there's no magic wands. In countries where the governance is poor, we have collectively an issue. Now, there is lots of mechanism for the other emerging countries where capital can flow. I think export credit is a great solution, fantastic solution. Guarantees is a great solution because for both, we're de-risking, we're using leverage, and I think it's something where everyone can act. Like we as a commercial bank have a role to play. The countries, the agencies have a role to play in de-risking. The corporates can develop into those countries, and those countries can benefit from the solution. So there's plenty of solutions. Export credit is one. Carbon markets is another one. But we need carbon markets to be healthy again. I think there's been so many reputational attacks on carbon markets. I think today we've landed to something which is good. It might not be perfect, but I think good is way better than nothing. So we really need to, there's very good experiment. Singapore is allowing to pay part of the carbon tax through carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets. This is a great way to do it. So we need, again, to stimulate demand on this. And then there is all the development finance innovation that we're doing. With the World Bank, we're working on outcome bonds, which allow to finance things that may not have a cash flows or a bankable solution, and that works well as well in some countries. So today there's many solutions, but there is a condition which is appropriate governance framework in some countries.
You know, I was BNP Paribas, I was looking quickly on the website because I always love the claims on the websites, how industries, position themselves. And BNP Paribas said it's the bank for a changing world. So what is your expectation then in your hope for COP29? The bank for a changing world, to be a front runner, we had that from the company side, but also as a bank. Why would you like, or how would you like to be a front runner in a changing world then?
I'm a firm believer on carbon markets. I think this would, if carbon markets were to go back to where we were 4 years ago, that would solve a lot of things, including early stage technology, CCUS, etc. That's a fantastic way to finance this. So this is very important. And despite all the setbacks, politically, we need regulation to create this stable framework. This is absolutely crucial. So my hope for COP is carbon markets momentum, and I see a lot of good signal at the beginning of the COP, but also a commitment from countries on stable frameworks to enable us to do the proper long-term investment.
Thank you. Before I open the floor, of course, in about 10 minutes for your questions, so get ready. We do have time and microphones for you. Shamila, I'd like to zoom in with you again to South Africa, because we listen to a lot of instruments and expectations and questions, and of course how Germany can also support other countries in that way towards net zero. So keyword just energy transition. It is a partnership. It is published, of course, and in a lot of titles. So partnerships, and these partnerships, of course, are called as key instruments. But maybe quick reality check. You know, what happens in South Africa, and do they really help when it comes to the just energy transition partnerships? And what elements, especially, are helpful on that journey? How would you look onto these?
So I think Dr. Anna covered a lot already in relation to what is needed, and I think we can underscore those absolutely. When we're looking at the just energy transition, we certainly need to look at the quality as well as the quantum of the financing, and that's well known. You know, the grant components have been something that we've been looking at needing to increase, because there are aspects of related to the transition that are not productive assets. So even concessional finance, as concessional as it might be, is requiring the repayment of a debt. And if the underlying thing that you're trying to change isn't a productive asset, it can't actually repay that debt. And so if we look at the transition, for example, whether it's the reskilling of workers or whether it's compensation for people that you need to now take out of the coal value chain, those are the kinds of things that we are really quite situational based. And I have to say up front, I think huge gratitude to the way Germany has approached the partnership with South Africa, and the effort that's been put in to try to understand on the ground. I have just in the last few months been in about 3 meetings where Jennifer Morgan has been in South Africa, in the room, asking questions and really wanting to hear some very difficult answers that have been given to her about, you know, what the reality is. And I think that for me is really demonstrative of what is needed to actually be on the ground, understanding and listening to, this is what's happened in Mpumalanga, this is what's happened here. In practice, this is what it's going to make me need for us to change. And being able to say, well, okay, how does that translate then into the creation of the NDCs, but then also the financing and more broadly the support? I look at the support that's come from KfW and GIZ, even through NBI programs that are going beyond the obvious financing needs to actually building the fabric of what is going to be needed to support the transition. In the skills, I mean, we're very actively involved in that in the green transition. And the support to be able to grow that in support of technical education. You know, we forget that we need to build the people that are going to power that transition. And how do we get into that system? And we've got so much of support in that regard already through those partnerships where they're seeing ahead of the curve. And that wouldn't have been financed. Those things would not have been possible without that kind of support. So it's beyond even the traditional climate finance, but it's an understanding that. So for me, those are the things that we need, that is really understanding in those spaces, in those places, what's needed. And that is going to power the economy, because I have absolutely no doubt that we have the right brain capacity to have the innovation, to have the changes. And then, of course, from a South Africa perspective, we need clarity on a policy level from our own country, you know. And then we can be able to say, listen, this is what we're doing. And if we're doing that, that's what we need in investment. The banks will be able to come in and support that when they have that clarity. The industries will be able to invest in the right sort of things if they need to do that. So it is going to have to be a collaborative and collective approach. I think the private sector is keen, but it is reticent. We're also in quite a big political shift, and I think we can't underestimate that.
We are all are. So how is this affecting the fabric, as you mentioned,
Absolutely.
the fabric of the journey towards transition and net zero? You know, what is the threat also for the fabric
Absolutely.
then?
So I think the fabric for the transition right now is, I worry about the time factor. We know we don't have time to effect this transition if we want to see an impact on the 1.5 degrees, right? Or to be able to have reality to achieve that. So when we have big political transitions that start making people withdraw, we're actually delaying on action. And I think is being able to find the spaces where action can happen and no regret decisions can happen, even outside of whatever the political context. And the momentum, I think, that we're starting to see in the private sector is the positive one. With leadership, like we're seeing from Heidelberg Materials and a lot of other companies. In South Africa, the mining sector is pushing ahead. It is committing, for example, to its net zero. Some of manufacturing is doing that. It doesn't always know how it's going to get there, but it knows it needs to try. And, we're seeing the similar things in banking as well. So I am encouraged by that. I would like to see that partnerships with other countries are actually looking to promote those positive actions and give them that additional support and I think a confidence to say, you're doing the right thing, we support you, and here we are.
Thank you. Thank you for that look and traveling, to South Africa and, of course, the very special industry, economic ecosystem. Katharina Bäume-Burg, when we are looking into these political storms that we are currently facing in the political ecosystems, and you were mentioning, of course, earlier that it is under discussed to have a demand for the business cases to create the green market. With these turbulences all over the world, politically speaking, is that something that is a fear to you, that the demand is coming too late, or that the green market will be developed too late for a business case? Because in the end, your shareholders, they want to criticize and they're gonna ask you, what are you doing?
No, honestly, exactly. I think that is a fear, and that is something that is very, very important to us. We need the demand, we need stability, and we need regulatory frameworks. Other than that, industries are not able to invest and develop. And I think this is what we have to work on, and this is why public-private partnership and basically really interlinking what politics does, what the companies do, how the financing sector works, is so important. Because otherwise we will not get to the progress that we need. And I mean, the truth is we are all far too slow anyways, right? If we see how the carbon budget curve is going, that we are already at plus 1.5 degrees most of the year. So in a way, we are far too slow anyways.
What are the financing needs from your industry, when it comes to create capital and leverage investments? Where is a blockage in that regard still?
I mean, I think it's a very broad, that's a very broad question. So first of all, the financing need is very, very high. So if we just look at our company, and if we look at the investment that is needed just for carbon capture and storage, we believe that we will need 1.5 billion until 2030, which is an enormous amount for a company to invest. And I think it's very essential that we have instruments in place that we can utilize. And if we look at, for example, the European Innovation Fund, and the way it funds projects, then that's not sufficient to get to a real larger scale. So it's not about financing just the one pilot. It is about the question of how can we scale new technologies and new parts of industries that didn't exist in the past. And I think so we need mechanisms like that. We need contracts for difference that de-risk the industry. And I mean, as much as I agree that industry does need to take a risk as well, and we still need to make sure that we de-risk it enough that it's still okay for shareholders, right? So it's very much a balancing act, and for that we need the right tools, if you want so.
Thank you. Stefan, when I come to the KfW report study, there were 4 main obstacles that are currently impeding private climate financing. You mentioned in that report, it was mentioned complex risk profiles, large investment volumes, long investment timeframes, and knowledge and capacity gaps, but also the call for expanding the de-risking toolkit. What is on that agenda? What do we need to de-risk investments more than ever before? Also, a little call to action from your side when it comes to the toolkit for de-risking investments for green transition.
Yeah, I guess the call for action couldn't be louder.
Exclamation mark.
But I don't think fear is a positive motivation.
So what do we do?
So I think we should look, of course, into ways how we get into the implementation. And first of all, where are the areas of implementations? Let's focus on the countries which provides most CO2 emissions. Let's focus on those countries which do not provide CO2 emissions on their social and economic agenda and combine it with green transformation. We heard Africa, 60% of the capacity, 1% of the investments. I think the investment case, it's much more linked to social and economic progress if a green industry can create jobs. You will have the social acceptance, and policymakers need to provide a stable long-term framework. That is a key prerequisite for investments. And in the more industrialized countries, innovation plays, of course, a key role. But currently in Europe or in Germany, the risk capital is not there, whether we like it or not, compared to the US. And secondly, as you rightly said, we don't scale quickly enough innovation. That is a concern to me because the International Energy Agency states that to win this fight against climate war, 50% of the innovation is not even invented. So innovation plays a crucial role, and that's where we as KfW come in with risk capital. We had the WIN initiative in Germany with stakeholders mobilizing 12 billion by the end of this century. And hopefully we will double or triple this amount to make a difference in our country. And via DEG, a subsidiary of KfW, we have 1 billion of investments outside Germany, in particular in emerging markets, and we have instruments to scale it. And the instruments are known. The instruments is first loss piece, the instruments is risk assurance. So normally banks are on the table. I think we should also get much more insurance know-how into this debate because they understand the climate risk much better than the banking sector. They have the models because they insure the climate risk. Let's get them in and let's see which prices has this risk and how do we can create capacity. The World Bank reform again is very helpful because MIGA is now scaled. Again, with the support of the German government. So there's a lot going on, but in order to win, scale, 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 and not go for the 100% solution. Sometimes the 80 or 90% solution is good enough to move faster than we currently do.
How hopeful are you that this innovative powerhouse comes and get developed from Germany on, or from with a German engine, so to say? So how hopeful are you that innovations, are coming more and more now in these political turbulences?
I'm very hopeful.
You're an optimist, right?
I'm an optimist by definition, but if I look at our friends from Japan, you see, and this could be also German industries, there is a lot of climate tech innovation. And we should demonstrate that, but often, again, as I said, it has not the scale. In terms of the global climate tech market or climate eco market, China is number 1, Germany with 14% is number 2. So there are many business cases if you think about circular economy, if you think about solar, wind, etc., etc. There are a lot of good business cases, but to move into countries often we need ECA capacity, so guarantees capacity if you think about solar. So the instruments, I would say Germany or KfW has from the German government are very good, are well tested, but scale.
Put it on track,
fast.
scale up,
Yeah.
exclamation mark.
Faster,
Yeah.
scaling and faster.
Yes, no, maybe?
Well, yes, scale, obviously. I mean, we know that in many, many areas the technology is there,
Yeah.
and what we need is scale, rollout, and all of this. But I still believe, and that's also where my risk comment came from earlier, there are some areas where we still need a lot of innovation, right? So, yeah. And therefore it's both. For instance, I had a conversation yesterday with the energy minister of Moldova, right? And he said, look, 60% of Moldovan houses are rural, are not connected to any grid, and are worth less than 6,000 euros. How do you expect now these houses to to get heat pumps that are currently worth around that size, right? So we still need innovation, and I think the question really is why some of the innovation in this field, in the field of batteries, in the field of electric vehicles, is not coming from Europe at the moment, but from other regions, and therefore here innovation and scale is one direction, and the second thing what I heard from several on the panel now is the need for clear and stable policy frameworks. And here, yes, I mean, if you look at it, at the headlines and news, there's a lot of political turbulences at the moment in Germany, in the US, and many places. On the other hand, there's also a lot of continuity. I mean, if you just look at the statement of the informal European Council last week, one of the first sentences was that Europe is staying on course for climate neutrality in 2050, for being the first climate neutral continent. So leaders in all these turbulences are staying on course. The next European Commission is staying on course with the Clean Industrial Deal now. And it's very clear that if we want to become more competitive now as Europe, we need to do that on a climate neutral basis.
I'll open up the floor for your questions. Are there any questions from you? Is that a hand sign for a question? Please tell us who you are. And then a concrete question.
Okay, well, it's not a concrete. My name is Manfred Schepers. I'm the CEO of ILX. We were founded by incubation funding from KfW and BMZ way before today, 4 or 5 years ago now. And on Monday we announced that we are now managing for the Dutch pension system and the Danish pension funds 1.7 billion to co-finance without any blending structure with the multilateral development bank. So it's thanks to Germany's ability to support us now 4 years ago.
A front runner, as we
use that
term
yeah?
quite often.
So I think what we have demonstrated that for these large pension pools in the Netherlands, we have 2 trillion. In Scandinavia, there's 4 trillion. In Germany, it's a bit more fragmented, but there is enormous savings, even very close to home in Germany, where Netherlands next door, that can co-finance without any guarantees, without any first loss, with the multilateral development banks. So I think Germany is Europe's most important shareholder of the multilateral development banking system. Please support them. Please allow them to scale up, because what we're seeing is a big turnaround in pension behavior to co-finance with them. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any more questions from your side? Anything that is burning on your chest? I know it's early, but let's do then a last round, because of course, you know, it's nice to have you all on stage, don't get me wrong, but sometimes we miss voices. And it's not a critique to this panel, it's rather like, who else do we need to speak to? Who else do we need to have in our spaces? So from each of you, who else is missing? You mentioned the insurance sector. Use the microphone, but who else is missing?
Insurance sectors, investors in general are missing in this debate, because we need products at terms which are attractive for them to invest. A pension fund has a fiduciary duty to all of us who has an insurance contract. So therefore, to involve the financial sector much more as we do at the moment in finding the right path is critical from my perspective, and KfW is only one financial institution, and BNP is only one.
Let's ping pong. Constance, who's missing? As an inspiration as well for your panels, for your conversations, really to bring in different voices. Yes.
Investors are crucial, as you were saying. Insurers, because we are facing massive issues when it comes to physical risk. We're going to need to start channeling capital towards adaptation on top of mitigation. And without insurers, we can't put money on the table for adaptation.
Anna Löhmann, ping-ponging around.
Research institutions, because if we want to innovate, we need to have the transfer from basic research to actually scalable projects in the end.
Shamila?
I agree with all of those. I want to add, slightly controversially, in South Africa, trade unions. there's not going to be any just transition if we don't take people along, and the trade unions have the opportunity to either support or completely scupper that. I would want to hear more from them.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Katharina Bäumelburg.
Yeah, I must say I agree to all of that as well. I think from a private sector perspective, the investor side is very, very essential, because if investors can see the value of what companies does, and if it doesn't have a positive impact on the value of a company, it's very difficult to be a front runner. So we need to figure out what are the standards that the investor side needs. What does they need to see to increase the value of a company based on their sustainable investment and their technologies?
And with that, I round up. Thank you so much for this panel. Thank you, Dr. Anna Lührmann, Katharina Bäumelburg, Stefan Wintels, Constant Schölcher, merci beaucoup, and Shamila Sobrene. I wish you all a successful COP29. I know we are diving into our, what is it, Wednesday, Tuesday? I'm already confused. It's Wednesday. Thank you for attending, for being here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's very early in Germany, but of course, Stiftung KlimaWirtschaft. I'm waving to you. Thank you again for joining and for co-organizing. And yeah, come by, step by, and say hi to you, ladies and gentlemen, here at the German Climate Pavilion. We do have a full program online, but also, of course, visible here on the program side. Find the details at the information counter, and I would be thrilled to see you again. Have a wonderful day, successful conversations. Again, thank you, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.